Welcome back, podcast fans. I'm your host, Annette Hines, and this is Parenting Impossible, the Special Needs Survival Podcast. I am so excited to have Debi Arsenault here with us today. Hopefully, I said your name right. Is it
You
Arsenault?
did.
Arsenault.
Yes.
Okay. I always do that to myself. This comes from me having dyslexia and always being so nervous and not confident when it comes to reading people's names and all that kind of stuff. So I'm excited about having Debi here, not because she's an OT, which she is, and has a wonderful career to talk to us about, not because she's a mom of Carson, who is a young man in his early 30s. That's also awesome in and of itself. But we're here today to talk about this book that she created. And oh my God, it will knock your socks off. So, welcome, Debi. Let's get this conversation started. First of all, I'm recording this on Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day to you.
And to you.
And, Valentine's days have not always been happy days, right? Because a lot of times our kids with disabilities, they don't get Valentines in class and they don't do all the same Valentine's activities that some of our other kids can do. So we'll uh we'll make this a happy Valentine's Day for all of us. So Debi, um tell me a little bit about your family. Let's get this kicked off right.
All right, about the family. Let's see. So Carson is my oldest, and Carson is my son who has a disability. We tell people that he has Angelman syndrome, although it has never genetically been confirmed.
Oh, okay.
So we go that it was clinically diagnosed by someone who is one of the forefront people in the field who unfortunately passed away. And
Mm,
I'm not sure how other parents are, but you finally get to the point where you kind of get, no, no, he's not going to outgrow this.
right, right.
I remember telling the first speech therapist, so I shouldn't be buying college bonds. Is that kind of what you're telling me? So he's my oldest. I have to say I'm the youngest child, the youngest grandchild. I had no business having children. I had no experience. So I was kind of behind the eight ball with this.
Yeah.
And then his sister was born pretty much 18 months later because I was like, oh, this is pretty easy. You put them down, they don't move, they don't say anything. And it took a
Right.
while. And then my third daughter, who gets rather frustrated with me when I share this, by then I knew something was up. And I really wanted another child because I didn't want my daughter to get saddled with any responsibilities. I wanted them to be able to share it. So she gets frustrated with me that, well, you only had me for Carson.
Yeah, I said in my book that I had my daughter, my second daughter, as a do-over baby. And people get so mad when I say that. I mean, people
Yeah.
really take offense to that. But it's honest and
It
it's true. And that's where my head was at. Like, I wanted a
absolutely.
kid who could say, call me mom. I wanted someone who could have a relationship with me in a different way. Not that I didn't
Yeah.
love my Elizabeth to death, but Caroline was a whole different experience, and I needed that experience. So
Yeah.
I totally
I
get it, Debi, when you
yeah,
say
and I
that.
appreciate that because that kind of validates that I'm not the terrible person that she thought I was.
Oh,
And
well, we might still be terrible people,
well,
but
but I tell her, I said, look how wanted you were. Look how wanted. So we have our three kids. The marriage did not survive. So I am on my second marriage.
me
My
too.
There you go.
So
And
many
my
people in our shoes. So many.
absolutely. And his dad is involved, and
Mhm.
people say we didn't have the greatest marriage to start, and this was kind of an extra strain, which is true. And my mother just says that my current husband is golden because he took on all of this
That's right.
with his
It
eyes
was
open.
a choice for
Yes,
them. And
absolutely.
so they came in with eyes not quite wide open because unless you live it, you don't really know. But
Uh,
still, opting in, I always say my husband is just a crazy person. Like, who would ever choose this?
Exactly. Well, we got it the other way
Insane.
around. My mother said, "You're choosing my crazy daughter and her situation."
Yeah.
And, it is what it is, but we've been in it over 20 years, so I think he's kind of used to it by this point. So that's the family dynamic.
So
And
you've survived all of this and persevered. We'll talk about that. Um,
yes,
but tell me a
absolutely.
little bit about your professional life.
I've been an occupational therapist before I had my children,
Mhm.
because I know a lot of times folks, once you have a child with a disability, you get into different fields of medicine because you've been exposed to it. And I was the other way around. And I actually, when people tried to approach me to say, Carson's a little behind, I was like, I'm not opening any books. I'm not looking at anything. I'm not dealing with it. It is what it is. And we're going to see what happens. So there were goods and bads to it. At this
Mhm.
point, and as I've progressed, I've actually given talks to different audiences about what I've learned and how my clinical practice has been influenced by having a child with disabilities.
Mhm.
And it's a lot to recognize. I do work in schools now. I could not for a long time because I bonded with the parents.
Yeah.
I was like, "You're right. They should be doing more. They should." And I was like, "All right, this is not okay. This is not what I'm here for."
Yeah. Mhm.
But I also have worked a lot with people about learning how not to judge, which is kind of when we get back to the book. It's the theme of the book that you need to take people at face value.
Right.
Person-centered care is pretty new,
Yes.
and to try and build treatment around the individual person versus around what people believe it's supposed to be
Right.
is a different prospect. And I do a lot of home care, and people are like, "Oh, you're here to tell me to pick up the scatter rugs and put in all these things." I said, "I'm not here to tell you anything. It's your house. I'm here to make suggestions to you. No different than people would come into our house and be like, 'Oh, well, Carson needs to do this.' I'm like, huh, good
Yeah.
luck, because it's not going to happen." you know? So spend a day in my shoes, and then you can tell me what he should do, because it's just not going to happen like that.
And if they could get it to happen, you'd be so grateful.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
let
But
them have it.
You're not his mom. He won't do that for me. And I hear that all the time from my patients. It's like, well, they'll do it for you. I'm like, you're right, because I'm not family.
So
Yeah,
true.
exactly. So it's been quite a journey. But again, I've been an occupational therapist now for over 40 years. So I think I've done a pretty decent job of combining everything. And yourselves, and I'm sure your listeners know, when you go to the doctor's office, you're kind of grateful if you have a medical background, because they
Yeah.
don't always talk in English, and they don't always approach you with things that are understandable.
Do you feel that they are, um, more respectful because you can speak their language?
I'm not really sure. I've never really felt disrespected. I have to
Mhm.
say that. I just think that I don't think medical professionals always understand that someone doesn't speak that lingo.
Yeah.
And I find it on IEP meetings again,
Oh my
and I'm
god, yeah.
sure you found it, that you're going through all of the rigmarole of the IEP, and the parents look like a deer in the headlights. And I'm like, okay,
Yes.
you know, so your child has an intellectual disability, and everybody, because we have to categorize. And I'm like, I always interject. I'm like, okay, please don't think that that means your child's never going to be able to do something.
Right.
You
Of
know,
course.
learning that we've all gone, at least, well, I can only talk for me. Initially, don't label my son. He just don't call him
Mm,
anything. And then you're just like, okay, whatever you want to say it, because I need services.
yeah.
And to learn that is brutal.
Yes. Yes. You mentioned a couple things in your form. So funny, by the way. Debbie is a comedian,
Oh, God.
so she had quite the funny comments on the form that I ask everybody to fill out before we go on a podcast together. So, but you talked about your kids. You talked about your other kids, the non-disabled kids. And,
Mhm.
I really want to talk to you for a minute about that because we we joked about, having another child
Yes.
just because whatever your reasons are. But
Yeah.
it is tough on them. My younger daughter certainly had some anxiety
Mhm.
around the constant medical interventions, the constant people through the house. There was just always so much going on.
Yes.
And so, that shaped her. And then now she ended up going into a field that's a helping field,
Of
which
course.
you mentioned about your kids as well. So
Yes.
tell me about your two
Yes.
daughters.
You you absolutely worry. Well, and again, I don't mean to talk so globally. Worried, what is this going to do to my kids? Because, I cannot remember doing homework with my daughters. I have no recollection of it. I must have at some point, but you're so involved with everything else that's going on that you
Yes.
just don't remember. I'm very sad. I don't remember when my middle daughter started walking. I like the milestones. It's sad to me. So you do worry about them. In fact, I think we overcompensate. At
Mm,
least I think I did. I think, my kids might disagree with me, but I think they had a pretty good upbringing. They got
mhm,
exposed to quite a lot of things. So, yeah, so now one daughter is a special ed teacher, which doesn't surprise me at all because she has been Carson's champion forever. And the other daughter is a surgical specialist in nursing for vets.
mhm.
So she's always had this wild thing about animals. They're both just amazing and I'm just so proud of them. What I think is even more interesting is the gentleman that they bring home. So my middle daughter's married and I had shared this when I at the rehearsal dinner that talk about somebody getting into a situation and with their eyes open. I walked in their apartment one day and Carson's in a bubble bath because he's hanging out at his sister's house and her husband, who was her fiance at the time, walks in, doesn't miss a beat, high fives Carson in the bubbles and just walks on and does his thing. And I'm like, "Oh my god, who else would just like not be phased by this 30-year-old
Yeah.
man in a bubble bath in your house?"
He's a keeper for sure.
Exactly, and that's what I said. I'm like, "This is exactly he's not going anywhere." And then my other daughter's boyfriend was very nervous about meeting Carson because he knew he had competition and he's not gonna like me as much. So, it's fascinating to see who they bring in.
Mhm,
So, they're fine, and they're the most compassionate, loving children friends, they're fabulous.
were they always like that, or did they have moments where they kinda chafed against that role a bit?
I It wasn't that they didn't love him or care for him. Some of his behaviors when he was younger drove them crazy,
Mhm,
which I understand. I mean, I don't think they were ever jealous because he came first, but Joelle's very organized and likes to have her things in space.
mhm,
And Carson loves slapstick. So he seeing somebody get frustrated or angry, he will just giggle at you and think it's hysterical, which is not the greatest thing. So she was very possessive. Um what we did for Shayna's room, actually they were both in the room at that time. I put a Dutch door on their room, but it was higher up so that they could have some privacy, but Carson could see them.
okay.
And then he learned how to throw stuff in the room, which really wasn't the greatest option. So
Uh-oh.
I lost you for a sec. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
I'm not sure they would have to tell you if they ever resented it. And I'm not so sure they did, but they definitely had to make sacrifices for it. And what we would joke about was, well, it's not like Carson's going to tell anybody anything. He can't,
Yeah,
you
he
know.
could he's a good secret keeper. So that's so funny because, Debbie, I had that same situation with my daughters. My Elizabeth was nonverbal, And so we would say the same thing to Caroline. Well, Elizabeth will keep all your secrets. You know, she's the best sister ever because she's never
Yep.
going to tattle on you.
There you go.
So,
Yep.
talk to me a little bit about being nonverbal, and because that's going to lead into the book.
Yeah.
So,
The joke of it is that he's the noisiest nonverbal child you're ever going to meet.
yeah.
So we kind of laugh when we tell Carson that he has to be quiet. Um, we're so used to it. It just, he never took to any of the formal stuff. He had the PEX cards, and he would kind of look at you like, why on earth do I have to bring you the picture of the toothbrush when I can just go get it?
Hmm.
I don't understand this. And he has a fabulous talker, and he my daughter gets frustrated because he'll use it for other people, but I don't always have him use it so much at home.
Okay.
So, and it's, can he tell me about his day? No. But do we know what he wants? We've kind of got it figured out at this point. He's a
Hmm.
praxic, so learning sign language was very difficult.
Okay.
And then the hardest part, so he can't put his fingers together to say more. He would clap for more. And then
Oh,
you
nice.
want to reward him. And I remember being in the driveway and him clapping because he wanted more of something. And it's like, oh, buddy, we can't. We've got to go do this. I can't get it right now.
Yeah.
And that being torn between him finally doing it and not being able to follow through with it.
Right.
He had a picture book for a while. And I mean, I do remember the first time he pointed to hamburger, and we were probably at McDonald's in 2 seconds because it was like, okay, I got this. But I don't, as far as him being nonverbal, I mean, I think, and again, it could be my denial. You spend enough time with him and you know what he wants.
Hmm.
But, I remember again, one of the big wigs in the field when we went to Children's Hospital. And well, how do you know what he wants? He's not telling you. You don't know. And I'm like, you know what? I'm doing the best I can here. Okay.
Yeah.
We're getting his needs across. You definitely know when he's angry. You definitely know when, he can't tell you when he's hurt, and it was behaviors.
Hmm.
So, if Carson fell and you want to go help him, don't go near him because the first thing that comes near him when he's hurt is he'll go after it.
Okay.
And you have to learn that.
Well,
But
all behavior is communication.
exactly, in its own way. We
Hmm.
just, because we're around him more, we understand it. And are
Right.
there times I look at him and it's like, buddy, I have no idea what you want. I can't help you. You know, when he learned how to nod yes and no at Franciscan, I was ecstatic. It was like, oh my God. When he learned how to point, it was like, oh, thank you so much.
Yay.
Yeah, exactly. But then you learn that the yeses and nos aren't consistent.
Okay.
So you can believe them and you can't believe them. It all depends.
Right.
So, we work on it.
Well, going off on that path, you talk about how hard it was to get the information that you needed and how frustrating some of the state agencies were that you were dealing with. So Debbie's in Massachusetts, just like I am, and here it's DDS. And so you struggled and they were not helpful, but you ended up finding the things that you needed yourself. PCA
Yes.
services, adult foster care services, and you've been able to successfully transition Carson to someone else's home so that
Yes.
he has a different adult residential support relationship other than you. So tell me a little bit about how you were resourceful enough to be able to find those things that you needed for Carson.
Yeah, I don't know how honest you want me to be. um,
Well, remember, this is going out to
a lot of
thousands
people.
and thousands of
Okay.
people. Let's just put it that
Okay.
way across the
All
world.
right. Um, the PCA program we stumbled on accidentally, which was kind of interesting. We had a very weird neighborhood, to say the least. My girlfriend down the street, her daughter has cerebral palsy. The two boys diagonal from us have low vision or blindness. Another girl around the corner had cerebral palsy. And then you had Carson. So we had a very weird neighborhood. So my girlfriend had PCA services, and I thought that, I don't know what I thought, that her daughter was significantly needed help with everything.
Mhm.
And then I actually got a job to write a PCA grant for an agency.
Oh,
And I was like, okay, wait a minute. I should be taking advantage of this. This
right,
works for us. So that's how I got into the PCA part of it. So what it is, and I don't know if they have it in all other states, it's a Medicaid program that allows you to hire somebody to help out with your person. It can be an adult who's the person with the disabilities, and you get so many hours to work with that person, depending. It's a crazy system. You get
right.
10 minutes for toileting, 5 minutes for this, and you add it all up and you end up with this time.
Yes.
So I ran that program for 11 years. And during that, I was introduced to adult foster care.
Mhm.
In adult foster care, at least in Massachusetts, how it works, there's two different levels of it. And again, the family gets paid a stipend for caring for the person with disabilities. And the
Right.
stipend depends on the level of care. So when I went and he started this whole transition to 22, and I went to DDS, I knew that they weren't going to give me, how can I do this without being rude? You write all your vision statements and
Yeah.
you get so excited, and this is what I want for my child. And
Mhm.
then I'm going to get emotional. And then you go meet with them, and they're like, well, that's really nice. This is what we can do.
Right.
And it's like, why did I you got my hopes up? Like, what are we doing? So I knew I wasn't going to get what I was looking for. And actually, some of the other Angelman families, we were thinking about trying to get a residence together in a house
Mhm.
and doing it on our own.
Mhm.
And it was so overwhelming because you couldn't get help from anywhere, because nobody will tell you what you're going to get until you're 21 in 90 days or whatever.
Right.
So we went to DDS, and the letter I got back from them said that Carson was not eligible for residential services. It was, and I was like, okay, you can't tell me he's not eligible. He can't be left alone
Right.
24/7. Somebody has to
Mhm.
be with him. I understand you're not going to do anything for me, but you can't tell me he's not eligible. So
Right.
I appealed it. So then we went back. So Carson won't get out of the car. If he thinks he's going to go into a doctor's office, he will not get out of the car.
Oh, dear. Oh,
So somebody has to go with me. So my worker had said, "Don't worry, tell them, and they have to accommodate him. They'll come out to the car." Bull. They wouldn't come out to the car. I finally get him inside, and the people that we were meeting with look at me and said, "He doesn't look comfortable. Maybe we should do this another time."
oh my god.
And I'm like, "Guys, I mean, I just dragged him in here. Like, absolutely not." And again,
Yeah.
I understand you're not going to do anything for me, but you know, no, this is crazy. So I didn't have a whole lot of faith that they were going to help
Yeah.
me. Now, in the meantime, I am so lucky. I am so lucky because adult foster care sounds fabulous, but it's not like there's families out there just waiting to bring people in.
Right.
It's
Of
really not like
course.
that. And again, I was led down another garden path. I wanted Carson to live on a farm. I wanted
Mhm.
him outside. He loves that kind of stuff. This kid would not play with plastic tools. They had to be real tools. He loves
Right.
it. Well, I'm sorry, there's no one out there on a farm that wanted him. And the
Mm.
ones that I heard about were like $60,000 for me to pay. And I'm like, okay,
Private pay.
yeah, it's
Mhm.
like FAFSA. Can I use a college loan? Like, how do we do this? So in the meantime, this is a long story. I'm sorry. So in the meantime, the family that was taking care of Carson is one of his former teachers.
Mhm.
And she had helped us out with the PCA program. So he's known her. she's got 4 kids. He's known 3 of them since she was pregnant with them. I mean,
Wow.
it's like Carson's just always been there. How we pulled this off is unbelievable. We moved and she moved within a week of each other, and Carson moved in with them. And
Wow.
it's been 2014 that he's lived with them, and it's amazing. It my husband and the girls are gone. They're grown up. We're boring.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's not like we're doing anything. Carson, I go out in the community with him. Everybody knows him because he's gone
Yes.
to this baseball game and this soccer game, and they go
Mhm.
here and they all know who he is. And he's part of their family. It
Yeah.
doesn't phase the girls don't ask, why is he here? Or, they just
Right.
adopt him. It's the most
That's
amazing
that
situation.
is so cool.
Yes.
It
So,
is very
and
hard. It's hard to find those paid caregivers, especially
yes,
residential supports. But
yes.
when you do, it's gold.
Yeah. Oh, I can't thank them or do enough for these people. It's just I'm very, very lucky, and I know that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know that you wrote also on your sheet here that you had a lot of issues with feeling guilty about your son's disability, that you struggle with taking care of yourself and your own needs. I mean, just a bunch of things. I'm telling you, you need to write another book. So this book is really great and it's about Carson and we'll talk about that's the next thing we're going to talk about. But I think you should write about your own journey. My book was not pretty, it was raw and real, and some people faulted me for that, but I think if we don't talk about these things, we're never going to accept ourselves in our human selves, right?
Yes.
And perpetuating this stigma of pushing all these feelings down and hiding them because, oh, these people with disabilities, they're superstars with superpowers, and we just need to accept them. And it's like saying that as a mother, as a parent, we're not entitled to our own feelings and our own lives. And I want you to think about doing something in that realm because you've got a lot to share. and
Well, I
and with
appreciate that.
humor too. So she writes to
Oh,
me that besides trying to use college savings bonds for her son, which is very funny, um, trying to get him to sit for a passport photo
oh
or a real
God,
ID. Oh my lord!
it
And then
was
registering him for the draft, and
yes.
and so Debbie says, "Well, I don't know who will provide the diapers and the pull-ups for him." And I just laughed hilariously.
I mean, these things that we all I assume everybody just takes for granted. Getting him to sit for that ID in the passport picture was horrendous.
Yeah.
Horrendous. You have to have a certain part of the face. You have to have a certain look. They have to look at you. He couldn't care less. Couldn't care less. And then when we finally got it and we're driving, we went to Niagara Falls and we went to Canada and we're driving across the border and Carson likes to point at everybody. I'm like, oh God, don't point at the guard. Just don't point. Just sit there in the back seat and don't point. And the thing about the diapers with the draft, that wasn't my line. I have to tell you, somebody else had the same thing. You have to register your sons for the draft.
Yeah.
Okay. And I did. I'm obnoxious. All right. So I wrote somebody, I don't know if I wrote them at the Pentagon or where I wrote somebody. I'm like, guys, what are you doing? And somebody explained it to me, and I get it now that, God forbid we ever have a draft, they need to go through everybody medically at that point because your situation may have changed. So you
Mhm.
may have registered at 18, and God forbid at 25, you might have had a stroke or something. So I understood that part. But there's got to be a way to save money that I'm sorry, if somebody wears diapers, they really don't need to be in the draft. But it's no different than a lot of you can relate to this. You get that letter every couple of years to reaffirm that they're still disabled.
Oh my God, Social Security and Medicaid
Oh,
programs are
and
so
it's
I
It's
mean, it's
hard
humiliating
it
sometimes
is.
what they
It's
put you through.
heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because then you have to go through again saying, "Yes, my son is disabled. My son doesn't like he's not like everybody else." But man, do I wanna send it back and say, "You know what? It's a miracle. He's talking. He's got a
Mhm.
job." It just you it's there's so many things. The MCAS is another one that makes me crazy.
So that's our state educational testing, which many of you will identify with.
Yeah.
It's
The
it's
amount
really
of
insane.
time the amount of time that is spent adapting that test for our kids. And
Mm,
again, somebody said to me, "Well, Debbie, what are you going to do?" Somebody's going to say, "Well, my child has ADD and they can't do it." Like, I'm sorry, there's got to be a way to weed it out. It just,
yeah.
and that kind of stuff, those are the times that it reemerges and the guilt comes back. And it's
Mhm.
like, you're right. My child is not like everybody else. And thanks so much for pointing it out to me.
Yeah, and frankly, it's exhausting,
It is.
it's just
It
exhausting. So, the cool thing, though, the thing that you have learned is that Carson, being in this world, has had such a huge impact on other people,
yes.
and it really brings you so much joy, and you had to tell this story. You had to do this for other people. And so this is a children's book. It's called The Magic of the Man with the Sunglasses. The illustrations are wow, blow you away. So fantastic. And the story is great. It's a story for children, a book for children, although personally, I think it's for anybody
Yes.
because it's a great story. And the thing is, you said you had to write a book for kids. Why?
I had to write a book for kids because adults won't listen.
Adults won't listen. And
And the kids aren't the problem, it's the adults.
that's right. And getting to the kids early
Yes.
and raising them up to be tolerant, or not just tolerant, but really truly inclusive in a meaningful way. And that's a whole different thing. Inclusion for inclusion's sake is not enough. That's not good enough, but in a meaningful way. And so you go through the story of the magic of the man with the sunglasses because Carson wears sunglasses.
And not just
And
one pair, and
and
not
not
just
just
2
one pair.
pairs.
And there's some great pictures of Carson in here with his multiple pairs of sunglasses, so many different kinds.
Oh, we
A
have
real
at
fashion statement.
least 100 of them.
And the gist of the story is that the sunglasses are, his style, and that because he's nonverbal, he connects with people by looking at them and by sharing the magic of the sunglasses. So, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Ab Absolutely. Somebody asked me the other day when he started wearing them, and I really can't remember. My husband was working for a driving company, and he would come home with sunglasses, and he thinks that's when it started. But we
Okay.
do. We literally have 100 pair. My daughter has drawers of them at her house as well.
Yeah.
So Carson goes out with all of his sunglasses on. So we've had multiple experiences in public where people have gotten angry with him because he stares at them.
Mhm.
And it's it's very upsetting. And I tried to make the book global enough because yes, it's about my son and yes, my son is disabled, but it should be about anybody that looks we all look different is what I tell the kids when I've been doing readings. Look around the room. There is no one that looks like you.
Yeah.
So why we're judging and staring at people, I just don't understand. Whether you're black, purple, in a wheelchair, have a crutch, everybody's got their thing and we should all be proud of who we are and be unique. So I have a very hard time when people start yelling at my child,
Mm.
yet
Oh,
my third or my adult.
well,
And
who wouldn't? Of course.
exactly. And I own that when he doesn't have his sunglasses on, his 3 pairs, he looks pretty typical.
Mhm.
And he's in the grocery store with us and he wants to go get something, we let him go get it. And
Yeah.
we kind of giggle when somebody's like, "Can I help you?" And he just kind of looks at them and laughs because he can't tell them. So
Yeah.
the story came out of that. We were in a parking lot one day and a guy started yelling at him for staring at him.
Mhm.
"Don't stare at me. What are you looking at? What are you doing?" And I was like, okay, my son's trying to communicate with you. He's just trying to say hello. He can't talk.
Right.
Where I really want to look at them and say, "I'm sorry, did you not have the 3 pairs of sunglasses clue you in that maybe something was up?" Like, what's
Yeah,
up? And then
truly.
people are mortified afterwards. And I understand that. But my goal is stop and think. And
Mhm.
that's what I say in the book. Stop, listen, even when there are no words spoken.
Yeah.
Listen. Because if you give yourself that 2 seconds, I'm fine if somebody's like, "Could you not stare at me?" Fine.
Mhm.
And I take it on myself that I educate everybody. That's my way of dealing with this. Other people don't want to, to each his own. So, I pity the poor person that says something to my son because you're going to get educated about a nonverbal person and Angelman syndrome and what's happening. And
And that
I
would
just,
be educated in capital letters with an underline, right?
oh my God,
Educated.
and a lot of extra exclamation marks. But it's
Yeah,
for everybody again.
yeah,
So yes, so the book is about how we Carson loves his sunglasses, and it's true. It's a true story. Carson wears them to bed, he wears them in the bath, he wears them all the time.
yeah.
And then we meet this man, and the man's kind of mortified afterwards. But I know that anytime that man meets anybody now that looks different, he thinks of Carson. I know that
Yeah.
because he was so embarrassed and he learned that there are people different out there.
Yeah, so that's my favorite part of the book. It says, "The best part of the magic is that it keeps working even when I'm not around."
Yes.
So it's the spreading of that understanding and that love that you were trying to that you are portraying in the story. And the man goes out, and after he has this revelation of understanding, now everybody that he meets who's different, and by the way, he's wearing a pair of sunglasses of his own, which is so great,
Yeah.
right? he he's friendly, he's happy, he's accepting, and it's just so great. And the illustrations really bring that point
I
home.
need to give a shout out. I have never personally met the woman that did the illustrations.
Really?
No, Summer Benton, big shout out. We met online through a website where you can meet illustrators, and she nailed it. And it was
Wow.
just a fabulous collaborative process. When you see the pictures of Carson on the back, Carson has a beard, sometimes a mustache, whatever. And the
Yep.
first illustration, she had him like that. And I was like, oh God, he looks like a serial killer. We can't do this. So, and I said, I know I'm his mother, but he's got to be cute because he's the hero of the story.
Right.
And she nailed it. The other thing, I didn't tell a lot of people I was doing this. Again, my insecurities that I figured everybody was going to laugh. And when I did tell, I told one of my brothers and my sister. And my brother's like, well, it needs to be, the man with the magic sunglasses. And I'm like, you're missing the whole point. The sunglasses are not magic, it's Carson.
Yeah.
We're the magic. The magic is inside of all of us.
Mhm.
And that's the biggest part of what I wanted people to take away from it.
Yes. Yeah. So great. It's the magic of the man with the
Yes,
sunglasses. Yeah.
because again, I have magic, you have magic, and we all have the ability to share that magic by just being kind to people
Hmm.
and
And
respectful.
and the connection. It's that whole connection on that human level.
Yes.
So tell me about, like, where does the book go out? Like, you mentioned doing some readings. Do you go
Yeah.
to libraries and schools
I
and
have
things like
been. So the book's available on Amazon. I self-published it. I learned a lot from Summer about trying to get a publisher to publish a book.
yeah. Mhm.
It's a lot of work. And I go in the library and I'm like, oh God, no wonder. There's a million books in there. So yeah, so I self-published it on Amazon myself. The other thing is that I could keep control of it, which is what's important.
Right.
So I'm marketing on my own and I have done some readings at different libraries. I had an event that unfortunately we had to reschedule that we're going to do. And
Mm.
I show up and I give all the kids sunglasses so that everybody leaves and we talk about, what to do with the sunglasses when you leave. And so far, Carson's been able to come to the events.
Wow, that's
So
great.
what was really cool was that we did a reading the other last week for a big library and Carson was in the back of the room. And when the kids finished the book, I said, I have a big surprise for you. Carson's here. And they, oh my God. And he knows this book is about him. He is so obnoxious. He gets his chest all puffy and he absolutely knows it's about him. And he high-fived all the kids and it was so awesome. And then when we were walking out, one of the kids was telling when we walked by, one of the children said to his father, he said, "That's Carson. Carson can't talk." And I said to all the kids before they left, I'm like, "So what do you do when you meet somebody?" "Well, you stop and you wave to them and you're polite to them."
Yeah.
And it just to hear their reactions have been funny. And one of the parts of the book, does he look silly? Yeah, he looks really
Yeah,
silly.
sometimes we
Absolutely.
do.
Yeah, and it's okay. But you know what? Sometimes people do look silly, and that's
Right.
okay. It's part of it. I share this story that I had a patient that had purple hair when I worked with adolescents. Look, everybody's looking at me like, "Honey, your hair's purple. Of course they're
Right.
looking at you."
Of
Okay?
course.
I said, but again, it's how people look at you and how you respond to people is what makes the difference.
Yeah. That's really the heart of it all.
Yeah.
This is so heartwarming and just and it's not it's not in that kind of syrupy way that some special needs books are, right?
Yeah.
So I just love it through and through.
I
And the
thank you
best
so much.
part about this audience is that Debbie is going to be my kickoff speaker in our new book club in Circle of Care. I'm so excited. So, in 2 weeks, we will be doing this in Circle of Care. And we are going to do it on Tuesday evenings at 7 on the last Tuesday of every month. So, I can't wait. We're going to have you come in and talk to our audience and
Yeah.
we're going to share our thoughts and experiences in reading your book. So I'm so excited about that. Thank you for
As am
agreeing to do
I.
that.
Thank you.
Book clubs are
Absolutely.
fun, and I'm looking forward to getting back to having one. So it doesn't always have to be about, some heavy clinical book, right? It
Mm.
can be just a fun book that teaches us something. And so, again, I'm excited. I think this is the perfect book to kick off our book club with. So, Debbie, do you have any final words of advice for
Oh God.
parents or caregivers? What do you think the most important thing is that you want to just leave this podcast and leave with your audience today?
I was telling somebody this the other day when they asked me kind of a similar question that trust yourself,
Yeah.
trust yourself, and don't buy into everything that people tell you. I mean, this has been so confirming for me because you feel like you're alone on an island.
Yeah.
And what I've said to people before, and this was almost the name of my other book, was that I haven't walked in your shoes, but I shop in the same store.
There you go. I love it.
That
Yeah.
that and when people say, well, I know how you feel. You don't know how I feel, but you can relate to that. And to
Yeah.
trust yourself and don't give up. I've
Mm.
done some pretty crazy things, getting angry at insurance companies. And I sat in the doctor's office one day and I said, I have all day. All right. I'm not going anywhere until somebody gets me an answer,
Yeah.
and my husband, like, you're out of your mind. Yeah, I am. Yep,
Yeah.
it is.
Because we're doing this for our kids.
Yeah.
It It is crazy making this life sometimes.
Yeah.
It's crazy
And we're
making.
all gonna make mistakes, and I'm who am I to say this, to not kick yourself for it, but it's really hard. You're gonna
Yeah,
mess up. We mess up
yeah.
with our typical kids. There's no reason we're not gonna mess up with these guys.
True, true, true.
Yep. And everybody moves on the next day.
But they can't write
Yep.
books about us, so that's good.
No,
Okay,
my
my
son
friend
can,
Debbie, this has
nonverbal or
been
not, he can still tell me what.
yeah, this has been a great interview. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on the podcast. I
Oh my
love
god, I
meeting
can't thank
you.
you enough for doing it.
Love your book, and I can't wait to see you in 2 weeks.
Absolutely. Take
All
care.
right. Have a good evening.
You too.